right, let's go. Thanks for joining me these 4 days. It's been good. Hope my monotone drivel hasn't been put anyone to sleep. Glad you came back. So today we're really just we're gonna be talking about forestry, yeah, but silviculture is kind of the name of the game tonight. So silviculture, what does that mean? What are how does that work in forestry? So, um, just a definition here, it's the art and science of controlling the establishment, growth, composition, and health of forests and woodlands to meet the diverse needs of landowners and society on a sustainable basis. So, it really is an art and science. So, obviously, there's a lot of science behind it and a lot of school I had to go to be a forester and that sort of thing, but it's also an art form. There's a lot um, that comes from just your experience, how you think things will look from a pretty subjective standpoint. So um, that makes it really fun. And another big word is sustainable. Everything we're trying to do here is sustainable. Forests are a sustainable resource that they grow back. Um, they're always going to be here. They've been here for longer than we have. So another definition: working with the forces of nature, the economy, and society to accomplish a landowner's objectives. So most of the time tonight, we're going to be talking about these ecological characteristics and a little bit of the landowner objectives. So it will get a little more technical tonight. So hopefully you get something out of it. It's just a lot of stuff that I find really interesting, and it's kind of the how and why behind forestry. So obviously there's a lot of landowner goals and objectives. It can be anything you want, right? Wildlife habitat, that's a big one. That's probably the most common one I get when I ask people what their goals and objectives are. Healthy forests, that's another pretty common one I get. It could be to sell timber products, harvest your land, that sort of thing. Harvest your timber. It can be quite lucrative, if you do it right and you have some nice trees. That could definitely be a viable objective. I mean, aesthetics, that's fair game. We talked about that before. So that's some of the different objectives we can get. But once I go into the woods, what am I looking at? Here we're going to start to talk about some of that. So think about, like, I guess a bare field, maybe a field that was cropped and then you stop cropping it. The first thing that's going to happen is it's going to fill in with weeds, with grasses. Then eventually you're going to get some woody vegetation in there, some shrubs, some young trees, and then eventually got your mature forest. So that's pretty straightforward, but there's 4 different kinds of stages that this happens in. So stand initiation, stem exclusion, understory reinitiation. So that's when you have seedlings finally coming up, and then pretty much old growth. So these are the stages that happen in kind of a natural setting without the influence of humans or any other like direct management. This is just what happens in a forest. So most of Wisconsin, pretty much all of Wisconsin, is in these first 3 stages: stand initiation, stem exclusion, and then understory reinitiation. There's not a lot of old growth. And, if why is that? I mean, if you think back to the history of the state, back in the 1900s, 1800s, people were colonizing out there to tame the forest. They thought just cropping every piece of land they could was the way to go, cutting every piece of timber they could find. So, um, we, really, we haven't gotten to this old growth yet. Um, it's only been like 100 years or so since that historic cutover happened. So it really is a rare thing, to find these old growth forests. So if you Google, the list of old growth forests, I did this earlier today for this presentation. Just want to see what it came up with. I This Wikipedia article, we have four four stands of old growth according to Wikipedia. Now, not sure exactly how they define it, but that I just wanted to kind of point that out, that um, we're very much, forests are very can be quite old, older than humans can live, obviously. So you really have to kind of think long term when it comes to managing forests. So just some pictures to go with those four stages here. Kind of go through those. Okay, so enough of the conceptual stuff. So now we have a little bit less conceptual, but this is what a forester starts to really think about when managing a forest. Um, Here's one of the things that I think of that I need to know um, before we make any decisions. So, what kind of age class is the forest? Either have even age, two age, or uneven age. It's really only those three. So, even age, pretty. It's what you think it is. So, pine plantation, that's the most obvious one. All the trees are planted at once. Even age stand right there. But this can also happen naturally, so to speak. So, like in the example where you leave a field to grow into a woods, all those trees kind of originated relatively at the same time. So then there's two age stands. Again, this can happen naturally or with the help of management. So on the left here, this was a timber harvest that was designed to kind of regenerate the woods here. And so what you see here is all this brush underneath. That's all trees that kind of grew in from this overstory that was seeding in over time. Um, and that was intentional. That's a good way to regenerate the forest for certain forest types. And to the right, I'm guessing, so this was a ponderosa pine stand in the Black Hills, South Dakota. And I'm guessing this happened after a wildfire. This is probably 5 years after a wildfire, I'm guessing. So you have the mature trees, and then the trees that originated at that time, the year after the wildfire. And then uneven aged, that's by the book, you have to have at least three different age groups of trees in here. So obviously I have the really big trees, these kind of pole-sized trees, and then down here, this is all, baby sugar maple in here. So that's your three distinct age classes. Not as common around here in St. Croix County, besides maybe in the eastern part of the county, where there's a lot more rich soils and a lot more management. So, when this stand was just getting started, it was probably started as a even-aged forest, right? But eventually disturbance happens, whether that was in the form of natural disturbance, such as, storm, wind throw, or human disturbance, such as timber harvesting. That's kind of what leads to uneven age forest. All right, so next concept, shade tolerance. Trees are either shade tolerant or intolerant. Shade tolerant they can grow in the shade pretty good. Um, Shade intolerant, they need wide open direct sunlight. Otherwise, they're not gonna survive. And then intermediate, they can survive in the understory in the shade, but they're probably not going to thrive. So a lot of the management we make is based on the shade tolerance of a tree. So we'll get into a little bit of that later. Um, for succession, I'm gonna skip this actually for now. We don't need to be doing flowcharts, but so shade tolerance again. You see the sugar maple here in the understory, just classic shade tolerant species you find in northern Wisconsin. Um, Along with basswood here, I think these are basswood trees in the overstory. They're quite shade tolerant as well. And then to the right is aspen regenerating. So this was definitely after some sort of timber harvest, a clear cut. Um, that's how you manage aspen. They need that direct sunlight. Otherwise, they're not you're not going to find aspen in this forest on the left. No way. All right, and then going to another concept here that we use for management, um, crown classification. So it's basically where the crown of the tree, the top of the tree, where all the leaves are, where they are in relation to each other. So this figure kind of sums it up best. So you have the dominant trees; they're getting most of the sunlight from the top and the sides. Um, they're doing quite well. The co-dominants, um, getting a little less sunlight, but still getting plenty from the top here. Intermediate, they're starting to get, starting to get pretty squished there. So um, they're starting to fall off, I guess. They're probably not going to be the healthiest trees. And then overtopped, um, those overtopped or suppressed, those are trees that are growing under the rest of the trees. And this is kind of the bread and butter of pine thinning. So when I'm out, marking trees in a pine plantation, you know, we're gonna want to favor these dominants and co-dominants because they're doing good. They're putting on good volume. They're healthy. So I'm gonna be removing a lot of these intermediates and definitely all of the overtopped because those trees they're just not gonna make it. We want to release these co-dominants so that they can stay with the dominants. All right, so silvicultural systems. These are pretty much just different timber harvesting methods. So, there's a lot more out there than just thinning the woods, doing selective cuts. There's a lot more out there. And here's some of them. And these are all, so these harvesting methods, they're all based on the concept that trees are adapted to natural disturbance. So foresters are a lot of the time trying to mimic these natural disturbances because, trees have been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And, before humans got involved, there's a lot of wildfire, um, there's just so many acres of woods that there's way more susceptible to starting on fire from a lightning strike, something like that, even in Wisconsin. So over time these trees learn to adapt to that, to take advantage of those conditions. And so it's kind of a forester's job to mimic these things because it's natural for forests to be disturbed. That's that's how they evolved, right? So especially with clear cutting. So that's the first one we're going to talk about. Clear cutting, so especially for shade intolerant forest types. So in Wisconsin, that's going to be aspen, that's going to be oak, especially around here, those two. And then in kind of the drier areas, so we're sandier soils, the central part of Wisconsin, maybe a bit north of here, it's a bit sandy. Uh, Jack pine is another one. So those are all shade intolerant species. You need to kind of clear it out if you want to manage for those species. So how does it work? Most trees are removed. So um, especially when DNR is doing these timber harvests, it's most of the trees. It's not all of the trees. We want to we want to maintain some of those trees, because in a natural disturbance, um, it's not always like 100% of trees are being killed off, especially in like a wind event. Um, it Some of them are left behind, so again we're trying to mimic natural disturbance here, and they occur. These disturbances happen in kind of a heterogeneous pattern, um, and that creates ecological complexity, which favors a more wide variety of species, plants and animals. So um, so let's see here. It's not so, some people think when they see clear cutting it that the woods is going away. It's not deforestation. It's just an aggressive kind of harvest that the tree that favor aspen and oak. So that's kind of the idea. Here's an example of a DNR harvest that I designed. So the yellow here is kind of the clear cuts, and you can see how these lines were made. I was basically in the woods just kind of trying to follow the patches of aspen and go a bit out from them so they get enough sunlight, and trying to make it, so it's not in such a blocky fashion. I could have just set a north line on my compass and just walk north, but you want irregularity in your harvesting. That again, that favors that ecological complexity, but a lot of edge species such as deer, they really like having the kind of wavy edges. So yeah, it's good for a lot of things to keep it irregular, I guess, when doing these clear cuts. All right, so here's just kind of an example of a classic, I guess, like DNR clear cut. So here's we left a lot of oak here. Everything else is gonna probably go to aspen, I'm guessing. So hopefully we get some acorns that we're able to seed in and grow back. So we have some oak component. But we weren't really managing for oak in this situation. There's a lot of aspen we're trying to regenerate. The oak we kept for the acorns. Obviously the wildlife will eat the acorns. They really like that. So that was a consideration we made to leave all that oak. All right, the next thing is that you probably might not have heard of is a shelterwood. Again, this is a even age management system. You start with a mature stand, you do some site prep, and that's going to be kind of either soil scarification, where you're scraping up the soil trying to make a seed bed, or it could just be trying to reduce undesirable trees by using herbicide or just cutting them with a brush saw, something like that. Uh, creating these conditions before you do this partial harvest. So the partial harvest, it's you're trying to create, basically you're removing trees until you have like 40 to 60% canopy coverage. So it's a little less than a thinning, or I should say a little more than a thinning, a little less than a clear cut. And what that'll do is create conditions that'll grow a desired species. Usually around here it's oak, and once that oak is established, then you remove the rest of it to release those younger trees. So here's kind of a figure. Say this is your stand before you do that cut. Here's what it looks like afterwards. And then the difference here is that there's some vegetation underneath. That's your advanced regeneration. And then afterwards you remove the rest of those trees there to let your new forest grow. So here's a real life picture of what this looks like. So this was about a year after that first cut. You see the stump starting to resprout a little bit. So here's the soil scarification, a picture of that, and that can happen either before or after that first cut. And then here's one on the Eau Claire County Forest, 5 years after that first cut. So you see a lot of regeneration happening here, a lot of trees, a lot of brush, really great wildlife conditions. However, in this case, a lot of the trees that were growing was red maple. Now, all of the trees in the shelter wood are red oak, so that's what we're trying to go for. Is we want the oak to come back. So, and in this case, yeah, I already said it was a lot of maple coming back. So if that happens, we can use a variety of methods. In this case, we use controlled burning to set the maple back. Maple is not fire adapted. The oak definitely is. So that killed a lot of the maple, and I actually haven't been back to this site, but from what I hear, it's doing a lot better with the oak. And then hopefully a couple years from now, the rest of these trees can be harvested, and we'll have a nice young oak forest. Okay, group selection. So now we're getting, those last two were even aged management systems. So if, a forest is determined to be even aged, we're looking at either thinning, which we haven't talked about yet, or those last two ones. Now, if it's an uneven aged forest, or we want it to become an uneven aged forest, one thing we do is group selection. So basically pretty simplified. It's making really small clear cuts. So either, less than half an acre in size. If it's more than that, we call it a patch selection, but really you can just think of group selection. And so this favors those mid-tolerant species that don't need, that wide open, direct sunlight, but maybe just like patches here and there. And this can also be used to create like a mosaic of different age classes in a woods. So this, as you could imagine, this would favor just a whole bunch of different, wildlife species. You have woods that are old, to favor, the owls and whatever other songbirds there are, and then the young forest to, favor the grouse, the turkey, the deer for cover and forage and that sort of thing. So really great method to make kind of a diverse and really wildlife friendly forest. All right, and then single tree selection. So again, this is uneven age management. So, and this is mostly going to occur in northern hardwoods. And so northern hardwoods, that's going to be forests that are composed of like sugar maple, basswood, yellow birch, hemlock, white pine, that sort of thing. Again, a little bit of that kind of on the east part of St. Croix County if you're from here, but a lot of it's more up north. So single tree selection, it's taking out, It's what it sounds like. I mean, it's going through the woods, marking single trees, and based on kind of the you're really considering each and every tree. It's takes quite a while to do. So, um, taking out a lot of times you're taking out some of the bigger stock, because especially around in Wisconsin, there's kind of a lack of younger trees. So it's more favored towards mature forests. So taking out some of the older trees and favoring some of the younger trees, is kind of how that's decided. And this can be ongoing for um, you know forever, I guess, in a northern hardwood stand. So every 15 and 20 years you do this, and theory is that the trees you take out are harvested, and then the younger trees kind of take over, right? So again, the before and after. Um, Now, high grading, we're going to talk about a little bit. High grading is it's where you take basically it's similar to single tree selection where someone goes through and selects trees out of the woods, but they're only taking the highest quality trees. They're and it's done simply for the value of that single harvest. And this happened a lot in the 90s, I would say, and it's not as much of an issue anymore, but a lot of times loggers would, send you a letter, knock on your door and say, "Hi, I've noticed, your forest. Would you be interested in a selective cut?" And they would use the word selective a lot. And, basically they're just going after those high value trees. And a lot of times the landowner just was simply uninformed. The logger would convince them that, we're not taking all of the trees. This isn't a clear cut. We're just, taking some, leaving the rest of it behind. You'll still have your woods. It's all good. But basically what that does, it sets you up for failure, right? Because if all they leave behind is poor quality trees, there's not a lot of future for that stand. Um, so there's just not much you can do to help it out. So if there's anything with like invasives or like deer browse that you're trying to work with, you don't have a lot of tools in the shed when it comes to timber harvesting to help you out. So and the value of the woods is the timber value is gone too. So um, it it happened a lot around in St. Croix County. I see a lot of like degraded stands. So and it's tough. There's not a lot you can do other than basically reset it by clearing out all that poor quality timber, and that's tough because landowners don't want to get rid of their don't want to a lot of landowners don't want to do the clear cut. They want to have their woods. So that's not a great option for them, and then it's not great option for the loggers anyway, because they don't want all this low quality timber, right? So just be wary if you have someone advertising selective logging, that sort of thing. um, there's a good chance, again, it's not really too much of an issue these days, but you know just be wary if you hear someone doing that. All right, so some intermediate treatments. So these are done, I guess you could think of it as an even aged. Really, it could be both even or uneven aged, but these are things that are done kind of in the middle of the stand's life before we're regenerating the forest, if that makes sense. So first thing, timber stand improvement. Here, it's basically non-commercial treatments that the landowner is doing themselves or is hiring someone to do out of pocket. And so here's an example where basically the landowner is removing um, poorly formed trees, um, either themselves or again using hired help. So this isn't non-commercial. It means they're not, it's probably you're not cutting enough trees where a logger is going to be interested, but you are benefiting the woods by improving the stock. So you have much more better trees overall after doing this. Um, and this is something, if you want to consider something like this, definitely call a forester, um, either me or a consulting forester that we talked about, and um, you can have them kind of mark these trees. Otherwise, we can walk the woods with you and try to inform you like what are some things to look for when removing trees by hand, that sort of thing. Um, and it can be pretty obvious, like these crooked lemmy trees obviously are not going to be valuable, but it can be a little more subtle too. So it's nice to have a forester there when you're just getting started. Another thing, another form of this is called crop tree release. So you identify basically a nice, straight, um, but smaller tree that is kind of competing with the trees around it, and you're releasing it by cutting those trees around it so that it gets a lot more sunlight. So you want to identify trees again that are straight, not very limby, basically trees that really are going to be of high quality someday. And then you can release it on one or two sides. Sometimes people do release it on 3 different sides, so um, there's a few different options. All right, and then pine thinning. So um, you're removing kind of the lower quality trees so that the leftovers have a lot more room to grow. In pine, this occurs at age 25 and every 10 years after. So that's kind of, and that is a pretty good recipe. If you do own pine, sticking to that every 10 years should set you up for pretty good success. It doesn't really stray too far from that. Now, a lot of times there'd be these planted pine, and people don't get to managing them until age 45 or so. Especially around here where there's CRP back in the 80s. People are planting pine like crazy, but it just never got managed. And so they're left with, 40 to 50-year-old pine that was never thinned. And at that, if you have something like that, um, definitely call me or call your forester to give kind of an assessment, because what happens is if you just go in there and you do kind of your first thinning, what can happen is that makes it kind of a house of cards, if you think um, of it that way, because those trees, they're so skinny and they have such little growth on the top there that they're just really prone to wind damage. A lot of times, if you do that, they'll snap off. They'll just bend over. So if you have pretty densely planted pine that's pretty old, it should be assessed by a forester. And then another note on thinning, this isn't just for pine; it's for any even-aged hardwood stand as well. So we were talking about shelter woods before. Um, like way before you get to that, again, for hardwoods, it's maybe not every 10 years, but maybe every 15 to 20 years, you go in and you do this thinning kind of with the same concept. So it's not just pine, it can be with hardwoods too. And that shelter with that clear cut, that's where you're at the point where you need to regenerate the woods. So again, this is This is called an intermediate treatment. It happens in the, somewhere between the start and the end of the stand's life. All right, so that was a lot of different concepts I just threw at you. But nice thing is we ended a little early. So, any questions on that, or is your head just kind of spinning? So let me know.
Well, this is Chris Libby. So I have managed forest land practice here, and my question would be, am I know there are two harvests yet to come on the books. What's the final harvest look like?
Well, you'd have to look at the plan and see what's in there. You know, it might be just another thinning. It might be shelterwood if it's at the end of its. What I'm guessing for yours, Chris, is a group selection. That's kind of what happens a lot here in St. Croix County, because that's kind of a nice medium between um, getting the forest to regenerate a bit, but still leaving quite a bit standing so that, the landowner's happy with how it looks. Obviously the clear cutting and stuff that happens a lot on public land, but private land, people are a little shy to clear cut their woods, understandably so. So group selection kind of fits that medium. I'm guessing that's going to be the final harvest for yours, but you're going to have to look at your plan to see specifically what it says.
At age 77, that being another 15 years from now, I probably won't have to worry about it, Andy.
Well, that could be the case, but whatever the plan says, I guess.
There's a question in the chat. What is basil select cutting in a pine plantation?
Basil select. That's a term I'm not familiar with, but basil, so basil area, it could be in referring to basal area. So when we're in, let me go back. When we're in these pine plantations, if you ever had me to your property, basically you might see me swinging a stick around measuring basal area. Basal area is how we use to measure kind of the density of the forest. So reducing the basal area to a certain number is one of the strategies that we do in a thinning. So say this so in a pine thinning, a lot of times the target basal area is about 110 to 130. Now, I'm not really going to explain what that means right now, but before the thinning, a lot of times it'll be around 160, 170. Now, to get down to 110, it's pretty easy. Every tree you count counts as 10. So, going from say 160 to 110, you take 5 trees out in the area that you're standing. So, that's considering basal area when we're marking pine thinnings. I'm guessing that's kind of what you're alluding to.
Yeah, Andy, this is Beth. That was my question about the basal area, the measurement for thinning of pines.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always hear it referred to from our logger as thinning, our forester as thinning. He does talk more about I will go in and do a basal measurement, and
Mm-hmm.
then we'll cut, like you mentioned, the worst out. And you do take some of the better ones as well, but this pine plantation I'm speaking about is in Oconto County. That's where it is, and it's pretty decent size, 300-acre
Mm-hmm.
that we manage there. So I was just wondering. I mean, he doesn't speak of thinning. I've heard that term, but most he mostly speaks about basal select cutting or basal measurement cutting, and then of course that allows for the sun to shine in and the trees to grow, the undergrowth to grow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that's a good sign to me that they know, what basal area is. It's a really hugely important factor in thinning these pine plantations. It's not just done based on like how trees look, because if you take too many, then the trees start to become poorly formed. If you don't take enough, then um, you just don't have the right spacing in there. So yeah, that's a good sign. I guess I don't hear of it called, basal select, but uh, I can tell there's different terms for the same concepts. I think that's all that's happening there, and I think they're right on with what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Andy? We have plenty of time.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be just about this stuff. It can be anything you're thinking about in the woods too.
I got a question. Can you hear me
Mhm.
okay? This is Kathleen, about like we had kind of some wind damage done in the woods or whatever. What do you do about the trees that are blown over and stuff? Do you leave them or do you try to get them out of there or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you can get them out of there, it really depends. So if you can get them out of there, that would be good, just so that you have access, to those areas in the future for managing your forest, because obviously a logger isn't really going to be able to get over those very well. And but the thing is, you can only really do that in the first year. After that, they start to kind of lose their timber quality. So a logger won't take them, and at that point, it might just be up to you to buck them up and try and get them as close to the ground as you can, so that they decompose a little faster. Otherwise, if your objective is more for like wildlife habitat, um, and you're a little more hands off, then it's completely fine to leave them, and it's going to look really messy, but the messier your woods, the more wildlife you're probably going to have. So um, again, it depends, but it's not a great answer. But if you do plan on having some harvesting going on, it's probably best to limb those and buck them up and try and get them close to the ground.
Thank you.
Oh,
There,
Any final questions for Andy?
there.
Yeah, I have one. Andy, when is uh how do you determine when a tree is like, oh, you should let it grow to maturity, but there must be a point where you don't, if the tree gets too old, then it hollows out in the center or dies or whatever. So when's the maximum, the best time to harvest, or is there, or do you just you got to do the whole forest at once? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I gotcha. So there is a point, and it's called like the rotation age of the timber. So if you're managing for timber quality, something that we definitely do on public land, so state owned land and also the county forests, we're trying to cut that wood so it stays economically like lucrative for those entities, so that we can sell that timber to sawmills. And so the age at which they start to decline in their growth is usually considered the rotation age. and that's the point at which we're starting to think about the shelter woods, the clear cutting to start over, or that group selection. So, and it varies by species. So, red oak can go for 80 to 100 years before it starts to decline. Aspen, that's a much faster growing species. And because it grows so fast, the wood's a little more brittle and more prone to disease. And so the rotation age of aspen is usually around 40 to 50 years old. So a lot younger there. So yeah, with aspen, we're clear cutting, every 40 to 50 years there, because if you wait too long, those trees are gonna hollow out, like you say. They're gonna the root system will go as well, and it won't be able to resprout and proliferate, and it'll probably get taken over by a different species at that point. So yeah, there are known times to start to look out for based on whatever species it is.
Andy, by chance, do you know the age on the pine? The age, yeah.
Yep. So for red pine, usually it's around like 60
Okay.
60 to 70 is kind of the max. For, again, we're talking kind of economic,
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep it growing so that you're able to get some use out of it over time. But if you're more concerned with wildlife habitat, red pine can grow a lot longer. I mean, those trees will live a lot longer. They'll just kind of start to slowly decline. For white pine, it's way longer. So white pine is just a much more long-lived species. The rotation age for that can be on a good site, with rich soils, like 120, 150 years. So it's just a really the trees get so big though that a lot of times, like, the mills won't even take them at that point, obviously. But back in the day, that's theoretically, they'll keep on putting volume on and on for that long. So it depends on if you have red or white pine, but
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the combination of talking with a consultant and maybe having some sort of suggestion, like a single tree selection, and then the harvester, the logger going in and say, well, really, I want to just do high grading. And does that happen a lot, where they kind of are not so interested in the plan that the consultant is suggesting, but really want to just do the high grading system?
yeah. And if that happens, the logger they just won't call you back, and they'll go find somewhere else to work. But they'll let you know if they're interested or not. They won't necessarily say exactly what they're looking for. But it's also, you have a good consultant if they know how to mark the trees so that they're both accomplishing your objectives, but also making it worthwhile for a logger to come in. And any experienced forester who's been in the area for a while should know how to do that. And it's also, again, we have all these ecological factors we're talking about, but there's also the how the markets are doing, the economic factors. That's what I'm trying to say. So foresters taking all those considerations and trying to make the most like feasible plan for your woods. So, and you know, a good logger, they're gonna have to take some lower quality trees. That's just kind of part of the game for them. And you know, they can cut it into firewood. They can they'll have to send a lot of it to the pulp mill, even if it's like bigger size stuff, or just find like other ways to utilize that won't necessarily return a high dollar, but um, like I said, a good trustworthy logger is going to be willing to take some of that lower
Thanks.
quality. Yep.
I had one more question about the scarification
Yeah.
concept. It seems like that kind of goes against what you were talking about the other night in terms of trying not to disturb the soil. So I don't quite understand when you would do that.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, it's completely disturbing the soil, right? But what it's doing is creating a receptive seed bed for acorns and or whatever your desired species is to fall into, and to grow. And you're using kind of a specific tool to do that. A lot of times it's an anchor chain, so it's just kind of removing that very top layer of soil, or duff we call it, which is just basically you know, like leaves that are just starting to break down, and it's just kind of exposing that top layer of good mineral soil. So in that situation where, you know, it's still wooded too, you're not going to have a lot of weeds growing in, and you're so hopefully those seedlings are going to outgrow the weeds in that scenario. And had one other thing I want to say about that.
I was specifically thinking about the buckthorn issue.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you have yeah, so in any kind of management with forestry, getting your invasives dealt with is definitely step number one. So you're not going to be doing any type of scarification, any type of shelter wood, if you have, you know, buckthorn in your stand. Now, you know, if it's on the edges, I think these systems would be able to outgrow, you know, any type of like seed sourced buckthorn. But yeah, it's, again, invasives definitely should be the first consideration.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got a question in the chat. It says, I have 40 acres of white and red oak trees. There is also some red maple. I would like to increase the deer habitat, yet I am leery of planting pine or spruce for shelter. Do you have any other suggestions?
So if it's a mature stand of, let me open the question so I can read it.
Okay, I think hang on, it came to me direct, but I'll copy and paste it.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh, got it. Red and white oak trees. Okay. So deer habitat, you know, deer need forage and cover, right? And planting pine, you know, that takes care of the cover. But you're gonna need, you know, open conditions for those pine or spruce to grow. So in any case, if deer habitat is kind of your number one objective, or if it's up there, some sort of timber harvest is probably going to be a good idea, because you're going to need some sunlight. If it's a mature oak forest, with, you know, a lot of shade, not a lot of cover in there, you're going to have to open up the canopy to get some sunlight, to get some of that stuff regenerating. Otherwise, those deer aren't really going to have anywhere to go. And I guess I would ask, you know, which part of that you're leery of with planting pine. If it's like you know, the work of planting pine, or if it's just like having pine in the woods when you prefer hardwoods. So there's a couple ways to address that, but I think, you know, getting more sunlight to the forest floor is to increase both the cover and forage is going to improve your deer habitat for sure. I hope that helps.
Thanks. Any final questions?
Hey, Andy, is there any projections um, on increased valuation of like logging and cutting? Recently, I know that in the past, like I want to say it is my understanding based on my conversations that like in 2020, 2021, 2019, there was a lot of down trees, and that might be more in the north. And so they took out a lot on the state land, the state property. And so we had like an overabundance of wood. And then all of a sudden, you know, kind of COVID hit, but it seemed like the price came down quite a bit. The value came down quite a bit, but it seems to be recovering. Is that what you're seeing, or do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, so I guess market prices right now, um I guess I'll tell you what I know, and I
Okay.
don't know if it'll answer your question or not, but so you know, for selling timber in your woods, so pine
Hmm.
pretty good. Anything above kind of I would say 9 inches in diameter will sell pretty easily if you have, you know, like 10 to 20 acres of it.
Hmm.
Um, Anything smaller than that, like what I would call a first thinning pine, so this age 25, that's all pulpwood. Um, so that's doing pretty bad right now. So it's going to be
Hmm.
really hard to find someone to cut small pine. And then for hardwoods, oak is doing really well. So oak saw timber, so anything about 10 inches in diameter and greater, selling for a pretty good price. Oak has been solid for a long time now, so you know, I would guess it's gonna stay pretty good. That's been like the one pretty stable thing, I guess, in the market around here.
Hmm.
Even smaller than that, it can be used for you know, firewood, obviously, but also what we call boltwood. So a lot of Amish sawmills will take that smaller diameter oak and saw it into kind of lower grade, um, either, you know, rail ties or lower grade timber like pallet wood. I don't know if they'd use oak for pallet wood, but that sort of idea. And then other hardwoods, I guess any kind of sawable hardwood that's not oak is also doing like decent right now. And then any hardwood pulp is really bad. Really hard to sell, hard to move it because the Verso sawmill in Wisconsin Rapids shut down in 2020, and that's where like 2/3 of the state's hardwood pulpwood went to,
Hmm.
and it hasn't been bought yet. So that's a really kind of low point for I guess the forestry economy right now. So that's what I know.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Unless there are any other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up tonight.
I just had one more question. I
Yeah.
hear the term when I'm in the woods, and speaking with the forester when he says, "Oh, you have a nice growth of scrub oak." So is scrub oak a viable kind of something down the road, or is scrub oak just junk tree? I don't know.
That's a good question. Wait, I don't. So I'm guessing they're talking about pin oak, and it's not something I deal with around here. I think it's a great, young forest species for a lot of different wildlife that has become like kind of endangered. So maybe that's kind of the perspective he was coming from. Yeah, I don't think it is going to be super valuable. Yeah, scrub oak. I mean, yeah, I don't think it grows very big or straight. So yeah, I guess I'm not too sure about that one.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you to Andy and thank you all for joining us. Look out for an email next week. I'll send Andy's contact information, the slides for tonight, and some other resources. And in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to either of us if you think of questions or have any feedback. We'd love to hear it. So thank you again for participating and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Great job. Thank you.
Thanks.